I think we'd all like to believe as Americans that can we just start from the premise that we all think this is absolutely horrifying, and we all would want to do whatever is reasonable and possible to stop this or to limit this possibility in the future.
I am filled, Buck, with questions about this on so many different levels. And my first reaction to all of these stories is after Columbine and after Sandy Hook, many different schools have put in policies that make it hard to get into a school if someone is armed and is trying to do so. And I'll give you an example. At my kids' elementary school, there is an armed police officer there. And by the way, I personally believe that there should be an armed police officer at virtually every school in America. That is my personal opinion. Some of you may disagree. I also, in order to get into our building, our elementary school, Buck, you have to show your driver's license. And you have to be buzzed in through locked doors. And then there is, once you are through there, another door where you have to be buzzed in. And then you also have to be buzzed in from the office. Everybody has to come in through the main entrance of the building. If you don't have they can look at you. There's a camera when you say that who you are and why you're coming in. If you don't have your ID, they won't let you in. They know me. I've had 3 kids that go to this school. Before I've forgotten my ID and had to turn around and drive back to go get my ID to be able to be let into the building. My point on all this, and I hear almost no one discussing it, is I want to know how this guy ended up inside of this school. What protocols were in place that would have kept that from happening? Did they break down? How did he make his way into the building to be able to commit these murders? Also, Buck, I want to know, was there armed security? We know, at least based on the AP report, that there was a border security guard who basically went in, and we don't know his name yet, and killed this man and may have saved many lives. But was there other security there? I want to know all the facts before I start demanding action, and we still know a small fraction, it seems to me, of the overall facts.
And you mentioned that, and I think it's important, especially in the aftermath of these situations when the whole country is reeling with grief, to point out that there was a hero on the scene here, and it was a member of Border Patrol. And Border Patrol is law enforcement. Border Patrol has a lot. I think about 30% of Border Patrol are former veterans of the United States military. You know, a very honorable service that is critical to this country's interests and has a lot of good men and women who are serving every day. And in this case, a hero who stepped up. I'd be willing to bet he probably just had a sidearm and went up against somebody who had a long gun and who was obviously in the midst of a murderous rampage and also had body armor on, and he was taken down. So there was a hero who reacted. Yes. I mean, in the aftermath of this tragedy, obviously, the whole country's heartbroken right now. And I think we'd all like to believe as Americans that can we just start from the premise that we all think this is absolutely horrifying, and we all would want to do whatever is reasonable and possible to stop this or to limit this possibility in the future. And we come from that perspective. The problem that we have right now, as I see it, again, talking about the aftermath, and we can speak more about the details of this. I spent a lot of time when I did counterterrorism analysis looking at, and there were whole parts of that discipline. I mean, in New York City, it's actually the intelligence division that does essentially counter plot work, meaning going after terrorist cells. And then there's CTD, Counterterrorism Division. All they do, Clay, is hardening soft targets, government, in this case, government targets, but all kinds of government buildings. And look at what you're discussing, ingress and egress, points, choke points for where people would have to filter in, things like that, right? So there are things you can do along those lines. There's obviously the armed security component of this. And as a country, having that discussion is absolutely called for and worthwhile. I just think that what's deeply disturbing as a political and as an in an aftermath component of this, because we all are horrified by what happened, is that it really does seem to me that the Democrat impulse, and I don't mean from random strangers online, I'm talking about the governor of California, I'm talking about members of Congress, is to turn around and say, Republicans need to do what I want them to do because of ideology, or else they don't care about a lot of murdered children. This is what's being said, and I'm not exaggerating what they say. Yeah. I'm not taking out of context what they say. And my position on this is that it goes beyond that. This screaming at the right is obviously not going to solve things. It's actually counter solving the situation. It's actually unhelpful, and it actually makes me angry. It makes me angry that there are people who think, and I'm talking about the governor of the most populous state in America, Gavin Newsom. I'm talking about the member, I think it was a member of Congress who shouted out that, or tweeted out, I should say, that Ted Cruz is personally responsible for this. People just find someone they don't like, say, you are responsible for this. Anyone who does that is unhelpful and standing in the way of preventing these kinds of atrocities from happening going forward. That is a bad faith political smear. We all know it. And I think that part of this, Clay, gets that has gotten worse. That has become now a more universal impulse from the left. Something horrible happens. It's the fault of the people that I disagree with in politics.
That's what social media has created, I think, to a large extent. Is social media is driven by emotion, and people respond emotionally and understandably when immediate incidents like these occur. My natural reaction is, again, as a parent, I think this is awful. I cannot imagine, like any parents out there, anything worse than having a kid that was at a school where something like this occurred. I really can't. And having to wait there all day and find out whether your kids are going to be safe or whether they're not. And when you're told that something, that they're not, that they may have been murdered, I cannot even imagine that feeling. It is devastating to even comprehend. But I step back eventually from the immediate emotion, and I want to know, how do we stop this from happening? And that's the kind of conversation. First of all, Buck, to my knowledge, you tell me if I'm wrong, I don't remember. I was in college when Columbine happened. I know we have a huge audience of people listening right now in Denver. And those two shooters at Columbine in the late 90s, if I remember correctly, seem to have inaugurated in many ways the concept of school shootings, at least in the way that the mass school shooter phenomenon. And so much of this has grown out of the mythologizing and the infamy that we foist upon these mass shooters. And so what often happens is you have a cluster. I don't think it's a surprise that Buffalo happened and then this happens. People with mental illness respond to the actions of other people with mental illnesses who they in some way find to be heroic, which is why I would say one thing, and I think we're trying to do it on this show, but I think larger media, because so many people listen to this, don't make them famous. Don't share their names. You can, the impact of what they have done, I would share the names of the victims. I would share the names of the heroes, like this gentleman who we still don't know from Border Patrol, who evidently stormed the school and went in to protect people, ran into danger. All of those people deserve to have their stories told. But we should not continue to provide fame to the people who are seeking it. That's one, psychologically, seems to be one of the driving forces behind why these happen. And then the second part, Buck, is I want to know how it happened, because I want to try to prevent it from happening again in terms of the actual school. How did he get into that school, as you were talking about, when you analyze this and go back through it? Because I look at it through what my schools and my kids have in place, and I hope that's sufficient.